Have you ever noticed how in your darkest moments, your phone feels heavier than usual? You scroll through your contacts, see hundreds of names, yet there's no one you feel safe calling? You tell yourself, I'll deal with it alone. But deep down, you don't want to, because loneliness is not strength. It's silence disguised as independence. Simon Sinek once said, the quality of our lives depends on the quality of our relationships. And he's right. We're living in a world that glorifies independence. Don't depend on anyone, be self-sufficient. You don't need anyone to make you happy. But what if I told you that's exactly why you feel stuck, anxious, and uninspired? Because the truth is, friendships are not just a luxury, they are medicine. Today, I want to remind you friendships are the solution to many of your problems. Not just emotional problems, but the deep, unseen fractures that silently destroy our joy, motivation, and purpose. Have you ever sat in a room full of people laughing, talking, living, and yet felt completely unseen? That quiet inside the invisible distance that no one else notices. That's isolation. We convince ourselves we're fine, that solitude means strength, that we're just focusing on ourselves. But deep down, what we're really doing is protecting the parts of us that are starving for connection. We call it independence, but it's loneliness dressed in pride. And Sinek reminds us again and again that human beings are not wired to survive alone. We are built for connection, designed to rely on one another. The truth is simple. Friendship is not a distraction from life, it's the oxygen that makes life possible. Isolation doesn't happen overnight. It begins slowly. You get hurt once, maybe twice, and you start to build walls. You stop reaching out, stop trusting, stop expecting. You tell yourself, I don't need anyone, because needing someone's always come with disappointment. But over time, that wall becomes a cage. You feel safe inside it, but you also feel empty, because no matter how strong, capable, or independent you become, cannot replace the warmth of being understood. The truth is, life doesn't hurt because of the problems themselves. It hurts because we go through those problems alone. Simon Sinek often speaks about the military, how soldiers who experience the horrors of war rarely say they miss the violence, but they always say they miss the bond. What they long for is not the chaos, but the connection, the feeling that someone had their back no matter what. They miss the trust, the certainty that they were not alone in danger. That's what friendship does for us in ordinary life. It gives us that same sense of belonging and safety. It tells our nervous system, you're not alone, you can rest. It's not about having people around you, it's about having people with you. People who see your worst and still choose to stay. When we isolate ourselves, we don't just lose others, we lose parts of ourselves. We lose laughter that heals. We lose conversations that challenge our thinking. We lose moments that remind us that life isn't meant to be carried alone. We lose emotional gravity, because when you're surrounded by good friends, even your biggest problems feel lighter. A burden shared doesn't just halve the weight, it transforms the meaning of that burden. Suddenly, pain becomes a shared story instead of a private struggle. But the world today has taught us something different. Celebrate self-sufficiency. Be strong. Don't depend on anyone. Cut people off if they disappoint you. Those are the mantras of a disconnected generation. Yet look around, we've never been more connected digitally, but emotionally we're starving. We talk to hundreds of people online, yet we feel unseen, unknown, untouched. We confuse attention with affection. We think followers mean friends, but when we're at our lowest, how many of those followers would notice our silence? How many would reach out? Friendship is not about numbers, it's about depth. It's about having that one person you can call at 2 a.m. and say nothing, and they'll still understand. The irony is that we crave connection but fear vulnerability. We want deep friendships, but we avoid the very honesty that builds them. We want loyalty, but we struggle to show up consistently. True friendship doesn't come from perfect alignment. It comes from imperfect people who decide to love each other anyway. It's in the moments when we drop the mask, when we say, I'm not okay, and someone replies, you don't have to be, that we remember why connection is sacred. That's where healing begins, not in isolation, but in shared humanity. When Simon Sinek talks about leadership and trust, he often describes it as a circle of safety, a place where you feel protected enough to take risks, to fail to be honest. Friendship is your personal circle of safety. When you have even one person who makes you feel seen, you stop fighting life alone. You start believing again. You start taking chances, not because the fear disappears, but because you know someone will catch you if you fall. That's why friendships are powerful. They don't eliminate fear, they make courage possible. There's also something deeply healing about being known, not the version of you that the world sees, but the raw, unfiltered human you. Friends remind you of your worth when you forget it. They hold a mirror to your best self when you're too clouded by pain to see it. Sometimes they challenge you to grow when comfort is pulling you back. They're not there just to make you feel good. They're there to make you feel real. And that kind of connection can heal the deepest emotional wounds, not because it fixes your problems, but because it assures you that you're not facing them alone. It's easy to underestimate how powerful it is to be seen. When someone listens, truly listens, to to your story, your pain, your confusion, something inside you softens. You begin to let go of the armor you've been wearing for years. You begin to breathe. That's not weakness, that's humanity. The hardest thing in the world is not opening up to others. It's staying closed for so long that you forget what openness feels like. Friendship invites you back to yourself. It reminds you that your vulnerability is not a flaw, it's the bridge to real connection. So maybe the reason you feel lost right now isn't because you don't have direction. Maybe it's because you've been walking the path alone for too long. Maybe the reason life feels heavy isn't because it's unbearable, but because you've been carrying it without help. What if the solution isn't more isolation, but more intimacy? What if your strength isn't in walking alone, but in walking together? Sinek's message is timeless. People don't need to be perfect to help you. They just need to be present. That's what friendship is, presence. Someone sitting beside you, not because they have all the answers, but because they care enough to stay through the questions. Someone who doesn't fix your silence, but shares it. Someone who sees your cracks and calls them beautiful because they make you human. At the end of the day, isolation will always whisper, "You're safer alone." But friendship will always whisper louder, "You were never meant to be." And that single truth, that you were made for connection, might just be the solution to most of your problems. Because friendship doesn't take the pain away. It reminds you that pain doesn't define you. It doesn't erase the storm. It gives you someone to stand beside you in the rain. And sometimes that's all we really need. Not answers, not fixes, just a hand to hold and a heart that says, "I'm here." Have you ever noticed how motivation seems to come and go like a passing storm? One day you wake up with fire in your soul, ready to conquer the world, and the next, you can't even find the strength to get out of bed. You scroll through social media, watch motivational videos, read quotes that once lit you up, but somehow the spark doesn't catch anymore. You start to think something is wrong with you, that you've lost your drive, your focus, your purpose. But maybe what's missing isn't willpower. Maybe what's missing is connection. Because the truth is, motivation doesn't come from isolation, it grows from belonging. And as Sinek often reminds us, human beings thrive when they feel supported, valued, and understood. That's what real friendship does. Doesn't just make life happier, it makes it worth showing up for. Motivation at its core is not about energy, it's about meaning. And meaning is something we rarely find alone. When we're surrounded by people who believe in us, we naturally rise to the level of their belief. We push harder, we dream bigger, we fight longer. But when we're alone, every setback feels like proof that we're not enough. The human brain is wired to seek social validation, not for survival. When we feel connected, we feed, safe. When we feel safe, we create. And when we create, we come alive. Friendship then isn't just emotional support, it's the foundation of our drive. It gives us a reason to keep going when the why starts to fade. Think back to the moments in your life when you achieved something meaningful. A project, a breakthrough, a goal you once thought was impossible. Chances are you didn't do it completely alone. Maybe someone cheered you on when you doubted yourself. Maybe someone reminded you of your worth when you were ready to give up. Maybe someone believed in you before you even believed in yourself. That's the invisible power of friendship. It ignites a kind of motivation that no self-help book can replicate. Because it's not logical, it's emotional. It's the strength that comes from knowing, I'm not doing this just for me, I'm doing it for the people who believe in me. Sinek talks often about the idea of a circle of safety. So a space where people feel protected enough to take risks, to make mistakes, and to keep growing. That's what real friends do for each other. They create that circle of safety. They become the environment where motivation doesn't die under pressure, but grows stronger. Because when you know someone has your back, you stop fear-kissing fair in progress. You stop asking, what if I fall? And start thinking, what if I fly and my friends are there to see it? That kind of emotional assurance gives you courage that no motivational quote can provide. It's not hype, it's trust. But the tragedy of modern ambition is that it teaches to chase success alone. We idolize the self-made story, forgetting that no one is truly self-made. Every success has fingerprints of friendships behind it. The late night encouragement, the advice, the feedback, the belief. Even the strongest leaders are fueled by people who remind them their mission when the world's noise gets too loud. The myth of solitary success is a lie that keeps us exhausted. Because motivation without connection is like fire without oxygen. It burns out quickly. Friendship also gives us something deeper than motivation. It gives us accountability with compassion. When you tell a friend your dream, you don't just share your goal. You make a silent promise to yourself not to give up. And when that friend checks in, not to judge you, but to remind you of your why, it reignites that fire inside you. You start to remember why you began in the first place. The best friends aren't the ones who tell you what you want to hear. They're the ones who remind you who you are when you start to forget. That's real motivation, the kind that grows in the soil of love, not pressure. We often think that staying motivated means staying positive all the time, but that's not true. Sometimes motivation is messy. It's crying on your friend's shoulder after failing. It's hearing them say, "I still believe in you." It's being reminded that your worth isn't tied to your progress. That's what keeps you going when your own self-talk turns cruel. Friendship restores the emotional energy that failure steals. It gives you perspective. That one bad day, one mistake, one rejection doesn't define your journey. Your friends help you see beyond the moment. They lend you their vision when yours is clouded. There's also a kind of contagious energy in friendship. When you're around people who are growing, healing and striving, you can't help but absorb their fire. You start to think bigger, feel braver, act stronger. That's why friendship is such a powerful motivator. It shapes your environment, and your environment shapes your emotions. The more you surround yourself with people who challenge you, evolve, the more your life expands. Simon Sinek often says that energy spreads, optimism, courage, discipline. All of it is contagious, but so is negativity. But choose your friendships wisely, because they're not just company, they're the architects of your mindset. And here's something most people don't realize. Friendship also protects your motivation from turning toxic. When you're alone, it's easy to slip into obsession, burnout, or self-criticism. But a friend grounds you. They remind you to rest, to laugh, to live beyond your goals. They teach you that ambition doesn't have to mean anxiety, that progress doesn't require pain, that life isn't just about winning, but about sharing the journey. That's why the most fulfilled people aren't the ones who've achieved the most, but the ones who've built the deepest bonds along the way. So maybe you're not unmotivated. Maybe you're just lonely in your pursuit. Maybe you've been trying to do everything on your own, thinking that's what strength looks like. But real strength isn't independence, it's interdependence. It's being strong enough to lean on others, to let them in, to allow their presence to refuel your spirit. When life feels heavy and your dreams start to fade, it's often a friend's voice that pulls you back from the edge. Not because they fix your problems, because they remind you that you're still capable of solving them. Motivation doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through the quiet reassurance of friendship. Keep going. I see you. You're doing better than you think. And in that moment, something inside you shifts. You stand up again. You try again. Because you realize you were never walking this path alone. And that realization, that simple, profound connection, becomes the spark that reignites everything you thought you had lost. ChatGPT said emotional intelligence is one of those quiet strengths that determines how we experience life, love, and leadership. It's not about how much you know or how successful you become. It's about how deeply you understand yourself and others. And friendship is the most natural, powerful teacher of that understanding. We often think of emotional intelligence as something to develop through books or therapy, but the truth is, it's learned through connection, through the way we love, forgive, communicate, and grow with the people closest to us. Simon Sinek often says that leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. That's exactly what true friendship teaches us. How to care, how to listen, how to see beyond ourselves. When you build a friendship, you're not just sharing laughter and stories, you're constantly learning emotional skills, patience, empathy, vulnerability, boundaries, forgiveness. Every conversation, every misunderstanding, every act of kindness is a lesson in human nature. Friendships test your ego and stretch your heart. They show you what it means to give without expecting, to support without controlling, to love without possessing. Over time, those lessons don't just make you a better friend, they make you a better human being. That's the quiet beauty of connection. It shapes your inner world in ways you can't measure, but everyone around you can feel. Think about the first time a friend disappointed you. Maybe they said something hurtful, or forgot something important, or simply weren't there when you needed them. That moment hurt, didn't it? But if you stayed, if you worked through it, you learned something more valuable than comfort. You learned compassion. You learned that people are flawed, that love sometimes means giving grace. You learned that understanding someone else's story doesn't excuse their mistakes, but it helps you forgive them. That's emotional intelligence, not reacting from pain, but responding from empathy. Friendships train that muscle in the most human way possible. There's also a mirror that friendship holds up, a reflection of who you really are. When you argue with a friend, it's not just about who's right. It's about what the argument reveals about your triggers, your insecurities, your need to control or to be seen. Friendships don't create your emotional patterns, they expose them. They bring out the parts of you that still need healing. When a friend calls you out gently, or tells you a hard truth, or refuses to let you hide behind your excuses, that's not betrayal. That's growth. It's uncomfortable but necessary, because emotional intelligence isn't built through ease, it's built through awareness, and friends are often the ones who awaken that awareness. Simon Sinek once said, "When we help ourselves, we find moments of happiness. When we help others, we find lasting fulfillment." True friendship works on that same principle. It teaches you how to step outside your own emotions long enough to see someone else's. When your friend is hurting and you choose to listen instead of fixing, you're practicing empathy. When you celebrate their wins without envy, you're learning humility. When you hold space for their pain without judgment, you're learning compassion. Every act of friendship fine-tunes your emotional intelligence. It teaches you to read the room, to sense unspoken emotions, to respond with gentleness instead of defense. In a world obsessed with being right, friendships remind us that understanding is far more valuable. You start to realize that most conflicts aren't about feelings. People don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. And through the ups and downs of friendship, you learn to manage not just your emotions, but the energy you bring into every space. You become more intentional with your words, more careful with your tone, more aware of your impact. You begin to choose kindness over control, empathy over ego. That shift changes everything, your relationships, your work, even the way you see yourself. There's also a beautiful vulnerability that comes with close friendship. You learn that being open doesn't make you weak, it makes you real. When you share your fears, your failure insecurities, and your friends hold that space without judgment, you start to heal parts of yourself that you didn't even know were broken. You begin to understand that emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about feeling them deeply without letting them dictate your actions. You learn balance, when to speak, when to stay silent, when to comfort, and when to challenge. Those are the invisible skills that make relationships thrive and lives flourish. Friendship also teaches boundaries, not walls to keep people out, but doors to protect your peace. You learn that saying no doesn't make you selfish. That taking time for yourself doesn't mean you love less. You learn to respect others' limits too, to not take their distance personally, to understand that love can exist without constant closeness. These lessons are the essence of emotional intelligence, the ability to love wisely, to care deeply, and to give without losing yourself. Sometimes the greatest growth happens when a friendship is tested, when misunderstanding, silence, or distance create space between you. In those moments, you learn the hardest lesson of all, letting go with grace. Not every friendship lasts forever, but every friendship leaves a mark. It teaches you something about love, trust, patience, and resilience. Even when someone walks away, the emotional wisdom they left behind stays with you. You start to carry their lessons into every new connection, every conversation, every act of kindness. That's how friendships, even the broken ones, continue to shape who you are. Through friendship, you begin to understand emotions not as weaknesses, but as signals, indicators of what matters most to you. You start recognizing sadness as a call for connection, anger as a boundary being crossed, joy as alignment with your values. You learn to regulate yourself not by suppressing feelings, but by naming them, sharing them, and processing them in safe relationships. You realize that emotional intelligence is not about control, it's about connection. And friendship is where that connection begins. When Simon Sinek talks about leadership, he often describes it as a responsibility to create an environment where others can thrive. But that's what friendships do every day. They create that emotional environment for one another. They remind us that growth doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in connection, in community, in the quiet, sacred exchanges between two souls who see each other fully. The more you love and are loved well, the more emotionally intelligent you become, because love is the ultimate teacher of understanding. At its deepest level, friendship rewires how you move through the world. It softens your reactions, strengthens your empathy, and expands your capacity for love. You stop needing to win every argument. You stop rushing to fix every flaw. You start listening more, judging less, forgiving faster. You become calmer, kinder, more centered. And that more than any degree or success is what defines true intelligence, the ability to love and be loved without fear. Because in the end, emotional intelligence isn't about mastering your emotions, it's about mastering the art of connection. And friendship is where that art becomes real, alive, and endlessly transformative. So as you take a moment to reflect on everything you've heard, I want you to remember this. Life was never meant to be mastered alone. You can read every book, watch every motivational video, chase every dream, but without real human connection, it will always feel hollow. Friendship is not just something you have, it's something you build. It's a choice you make every day to listen, to forgive, to show up, to love, and to be vulnerable enough to be loved in return. So here's my challenge to you: reach out. Text that friend you've lost touch with. Call the person who once made you laugh. Tell someone how much they matter before it's too late. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Create it. Be the friend you wish you had, because the energy you give will always return to you in ways you can't imagine. And if you ever start to believe that you're alone in this world, remind yourself, someone somewhere is waiting for you to show up with your heart open. The problems you're facing today might just need one conversation, one connection, one act of courage to begin healing. So don't isolate, initiate. Don't scroll, reach out. Don't wait, connect. Because friendships don't just make life better, they make life possible. And maybe, just maybe, the solution to everything you're struggling with right now is just one honest friendship away.